Hi everyone, I'm Yasid, here to talk about real estate. Hopefully, if that's what you've turned up for, it's a good one after this. My name's Rich. I look after the European organization at a company called Airia. Airia is an AI orchestration platform that has kind of two elements to it. One, build flexible agents, put those agents into workflows, and then two, underneath that, have a very strict, guarded orchestration layer that helps you manage things like tech obsolescence and change and all that good stuff. So going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we're seeing in the industry, in the market, how it's evolved, how it evolves, and how it continues to evolve, and then jump into a little bit of product. So hopefully keep you engaged for 20 minutes, and if you want to continue the conversation, be more than happy to. We're at booth 59. AI generated this slide, and it's a bit of a hallucination, but it gets better. It wasn't meant to come out like that. But we see this typical journey. We see you started with the chatbot. Maybe you did some conversational AI. Maybe you wanted some knowledge and you wanted to converse with that knowledge, and maybe that knowledge fed into a task. So then that went well. We see maybe you deployed that to the internet-facing version of that chatbot. Maybe you wanted to get more progressive with some AI, so the company went all in with Copilot. Started to roll out end-user embedded AI to make sure your everyday tasks could be a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficient. Then we see more specific use cases that bring in a little bit of complexity. Then we start to see momentum gathering in industries, in markets, in organizations. So we start to see that more chatbots appear, and that may have multi-model, multimodal approach. Maybe it's doing different things within your organization. So as time's gone on in the last maybe 6, 9, 12 months, especially and more recently in the last 3 months, we've started to see the expanded rollouts, pervasive AI use cases across integration of core systems in your organization, starts to lead to a point of uncertainty. And that uncertainty is married in a few things. One, is it accurate? Can we trust it? Is it secure? Is it repeatable? IT's grown up in a world where you kind of created an application or a workflow. It works, you like it, you want it stable. System resilience goes like top of the charts in terms of what's important. But then you pause because you start to see a little bit of flakiness. You start to see a little bit of fragmentation in your architecture. You start to see that your ability to be flexible and change in a modular fashion is limited. So perhaps in some cases, hopefully in the room that's more progressive than some, but we see 88%, roughly 88% according to Gartner and IDC, would say that we're stuck in POC. We're stuck in POC for all of the reasons that I mentioned. So we start to see the ideas, no one short of an idea. Unfortunately, GenAI is this hammer going around looking for the nail and its right tool for right use case, and we can all have that discussion. But we feel we're moving out of the POC state. We feel that in the next sort of 6, 12 months, we'll move to a world where you have a collection of AI ecosystems that communicate with each other. They communicate with each other potentially in a common protocol, and the way that you guard those communications can be fully centralized. And you can decentralize the data, but centralize the way that you manage and govern these systems when they're communicating with each other. So the technology such as MCP from Anthropic is going to enable a lot more of that collection of ecosystems, but to do that, you have to make sure that the trust and the accuracy of how these agents return information is one of which you would want to scale behind. So we feel that we're heading towards a world where AI becomes your strategy, your ability to orchestrate AI around your systems and your organization and your people and your internal or external users becomes fundamental to what you're trying to achieve. So all of that said, this is just a pure illustration of what's happened in the last, it's probably 3 or 4 months out of date, but in the last 18 months, it's been nothing short of an arms race of innovation. Who can place a bet on any of that? It's getting more accurate, faster, potentially cheaper to run. So how do you make sense of all of that? How do you go and pick the right bet for your use case? How do you make sure that it's going to scale in a cost-effective way? How do you centralize things? Now, again, as I said, when you're creating IT workflows, you started off with a bit of a one and done. This works, we like it, it's secure, let's scale it. You can't do that anymore, because if you lock in an architecture that gets superseded within 3 months, you are hamstringing your ability to use security as an enabler, use agility as an enabler, use cost as a strategy where you don't get exposed from having bills that you weren't expecting. So this isn't slowing down, by the way. We see this as who knows where the chips are going to fall, and it's going to keep innovating. There's knowledge share in this community. So if DeepSeek do something great, all of the frontier models take that IP and it starts to fuel the next wave of innovation. So It's been chaotic, but that is definitely not slowing down. So we come back to this concept of change management being really, really key. Here's a few examples. Month over month, every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, OpenAI deprecate a model to the next one. Now, in old money, you would always want to stay at like n-1, maybe n-2, because that's hardened, that's battle tested, that's secure. You can't do that now because if it's superseded, it's not supported. It's a backdoor entry for any bad actor that's going to go and penetrate something that is not supported anymore, that's not updated, not maintained. It's not optimized either, so accuracy is getting outperformed, and then cost is definitely getting outperformed. So this deprecation of old models is something that we haven't seen before. So our ability to be agile, here's an illustration of what that means from a cost perspective. Maybe 6 months ago, if I built something into 4.0, maybe 0.1, I've then locked in my architecture into something that potentially doesn't have a massive amount of benefit from a nano, but a nano is like an order of magnitude cheaper for every execution. So how do I understand that at the start of build time that continues into runtime and making sure that as these models change, I can lift and shift, dynamically swap? Then there's the performance piece we'll touch on in a little minute. Last few weeks, a couple of weeks ago, we saw quite a severe outage for OpenAI. So I think this was 10 hours mainstream Western time. So for 10 hours, all systems that were built in and around OpenAI went out. So we're going to see a little bit of flakiness in terms of these platforms as they scale. And it is what it is. They're not rock solid and stable and resilient yet. But so how do you manage for that when you're contemplating rolling out scaled applications that are powered, or scaled agents that are powered from some of these frontier model providers? So it's another factor of consideration. The new security concerns, data theft, model poisoning, taking your corporate IP, doing things that bad actors may or may not, or should or shouldn't be doing with that innocent internal users, perhaps doing something innocently with an open model that they shouldn't do from a corporate IP perspective. So you have this whole new wave of vectors that a bad actor can come and penetrate. So you have to be mindful of that. Data poisoning, as you said, you've got prompt security. So I'm a model, I underpin one of your agents. I have no idea if what you're trying to communicate with me comes from you as a bad actor, you as an internal customer, or you as an engineer. So I can't tell the difference between injecting me with a command that I now have to listen to. So for example, that could be an internet-facing chatbot, could be sat on someone's website. I'm a bad actor, I've penetrated that with a bit of prompt injection, and I'm now taking over that agent and commanding that agent what it needs to do. Now, the firewalls around an internet-facing agent are completely different from a knowledge-based chatbot that you might have from an internal perspective. So being aware of how these different vectors are creating these different opportunities for bad actors is something to have top of mind if you're thinking about scaling agents. Agent security is not just about prompt injection, it's about anti-jailbreaking, it's about protecting your corporate IP, making sure there's no spillage of data, making sure that you haven't got over-permissed data, like SharePoint is, a great tool for businesses to run their corporate knowledge on, but it's also a very open tool in terms of the way that permissions are managed. So imagine that you have an agent that can extract information from SharePoint and maybe put it in the wrong place or the hands of the wrong person. And we know Copilot is very, very good at retrieving information, whether it's permissed to do that from the user or not. So these agent security concepts start to become really, really, really relevant. I can't take the credit for this slide. I don't like whitewater rafting as an individual, but this is just demonstrating the cascade of change that keeps coming at us. It's changing all of the time. We have to kind of be mindful of it, but have to navigate our way through these choppy waters. Then we have open, closed. What's the right bet? What's the right way for us to take our corporate strategy? And had a good conversation with an AI developer earlier about the pros and cons of proprietary closed source tooling versus open source tooling. Now, we live in a world where proprietary always wins the race at the start. The open community catches up and probably overtakes. So again, we don't know where the chips are going to fall. We just have to be aware of the here and now. We have to be aware of the risks that sit in some of these open platforms today. So how we manage for that, and it could be that we manage a modular architecture that keeps us agile in the future, but we make the most informed decision on what's available to us today. So here's an example of Langflow, which is an open source tooling to manage some of your orchestration of LLMs, but again, it's open, so it's going to have these vulnerabilities. It's going to have that exposed in your architecture. Just being mindful of the risks and how you guard around that needs to be something that is taken into consideration. So you can start to see that The complexity around how these applications are built, how they're managed, how they're developed, how they scale, how they use internal data sources, external data sources, starts to paint a picture of a lot of mayhem. Then comes MCP. If we had this event back in February, maybe March, we wouldn't be talking about that. Now we're talking about it as maybe the potential standard for these models to exchange information between each other. But again, Anthropic have brought out this great bit of technology, but it's open source. It's open source, which means it has good community feeders into it, but it's also open source, meaning it's not built with protection, built with security at the heart of it. So again, unbelievable technology. We believe that MCP will really empower the embedding of different ecosystems of AI agents that can communicate with each other. But again, we have to be ready, aware of the risks. So it offers modular tool training. It offers interoperability. It definitely offers cost efficiency. It definitely has the ability to maybe disrupt what enterprise software has been like over the last 8, 10, 15 years, but it comes with some dependency risk. It comes with some insecure communication that you need to have visibility into. So it's just an awareness piece that when you make an architectural decision, make sure that you think of all things that could potentially hurt or hinder you in the future. A2A protocol, A2A protocol, another way of agents to exchange communication back and forth. You can start to see how you can keep yourself agile to anything that happens in the future with protocols and contexts like this that enables you to have an interoperable strategy as it relates to AI. So all of these things are going to empower a huge change in the agentic structures over the next 6, 12 months, but managing them in a single central place is going to become more and more important to keep you agile as your AI strategy gets more in depth. I'm going to flick past the headache because I mean, I've got a bit of a headache just thinking about all of the complexity we've just talked about. But this is a common starting point. We see simple input to an output. We might see different versions of these OpenAI models powering slightly different use cases, but I may already have 4, 5, 10, 20, 100 of them in my organization. I may have preference from users. I might want users banging on my door to say, I don't like OpenAI, I prefer Anthropic. Maybe it's better at some mathematical equations. Maybe my use case is slightly different to my colleagues in HR. So I need the best tool for me. I need choice. I need to make sure I can amplify myself with accuracy and confidence and trust to use AI in a little more rigor. So then I might want to update some data sources to make sure our corporate IP is protected and guarded, but then it's feeding these models to give it more context, more inference, more accuracy. Then I might want to tune that with some prompt engineering. I might want to put some dynamic data sources in it. I might want to pull and push information back to these systems. I might want to have local knowledge from the user really captured in my history so that it gets more adapted to the individual. It starts to learn how I interact with systems. I might want to, as I said, post information back to these source systems so we're constantly having an updated workflow. Then I might want to fine-tune the prompting so that it ever progresses and we have version control. We can roll back, but we can also have a collective approach to augmenting our prompts. So all of a sudden, I've got this fragmented structure that's building up underneath myself, and I have to think about, well, which way do I turn? How do I make myself agile to change? How do I make sure I can adopt and change and swap models as the risks become clear or the cost, the economics become unclear? So it introduces the concept of orchestration. Airia, as I said, is an AI orchestration platform. Here's a simple example of taking a little bit of information from user history, from a profile, recommending a user that it might be a recommendations engine that's linked into your product catalog. It may be posting that back out as a marketing campaign. It may then be modifying the user record in Salesforce. It may then modify some ad campaigns. So you've got this kind of engine that's churning around from a recommendation standpoint, but is taking a lead, enriching a lead, providing some data extract to make that lead targeted towards a potential end user or a segment of your market. So if I have this place where I can do rapid agent prototyping, I've got an integrated architecture that's open and modular. I also have a secure governance structure sat at the heart of that. So if I have that complex architecture that we just spoke about where I've got choices, I need to make security choices if it's not bedded into the platform. So you have do I build, do I buy, do I bolt on? All of these conversations and questions and decisions need to be made with agility at the heart of it. So we start to see that at build time and at runtime, we have model security, we have supply chain, Rug pulls are probably going to become, we've even seen it in our MCP marketplace within our platform, all of a sudden an MCP server will be pulled from underneath us. So how do we make sure that we're not beholden to individual toolings that sit in our ecosystem or our architecture, that if they're pulled from underneath us, we're not exposed. So these supply chain switch and swap and dynamically route if there's an outage like OpenAI need to be at the forefront of how we're thinking about these things at build, so it's consistent to roll that through to production and scale. Obviously, MCP servers, as I touched on, I'm going to speed up now because I've had the warning. So tool chain evaluation, zero retention policies. When you're guarding an MCP protocol, it's like a JSON pack that you can really contain some important information. So how do you really govern that with a transient database that doesn't store any of that information, so it can be ripped and replaced and exited when you need to? And a comprehensive protocol, same thing. Compliance, visibility, governance, and auditability around A2A exchanges. Any trigger, any reason, we need to make sure that we can route for performance, route for choice, route for flexibility, route for cost. Our ability to make sure that we're agile becomes more and more important as we see this landscape play out. So very quickly, we have pre-configured agents in individual line of businesses. You can get started. They usually are placed just for that. You get started and you augment and you update them as you go, but it's a rapid way to start rolling out agents to different units in your organization. We have flexible deployment modules. I do see that there's some pictures of the slides, but there's a QR code at the end where you can scan and get the whole presentation. So if I'm flashing through and you didn't get a picture, don't worry about it. In Europe, really important, we're having lots and lots of conversations from the Middle East right through to Central Europe, Southern Europe about containerizing Airia, maybe putting it in a Docker container, making it part of your Kubernetes deployment infrastructure, but hosting it in your cloud, hosting it on on-premise infrastructure, putting more guardrails and controls in your hands of managing these systems. So our flexible deployment options are becoming highly relevant. Little bit of background before I finish off. As I said, we're at booth 59, I believe, just out in the other hall. We'd be happy to demo some technology, happy to keep the conversation going. But our background, our founder started AirWatch back in 2013. That sold to VMware in 2003, sold to VMware in 2014. Subsequently went on to co-found OneTrust. So you bring agnostic platforms together with a data privacy company, you start to build a picture as to how we can help trust become front and center of how we manage these AI applications. So we've been going about 2 years now. We're probably touching on about 500 customers. We're growing month over month, but we'd love to carry on the conversation back at the booth. If you want the presentation, feel free to scan and hopefully chat with you later on. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.